Hello everybody. Good evening. At least it's a good evening for me. It may not be for you. Thank you all for being here. To get started, I always like for everybody to say hi in the chat and to tell me what city you are in, because we often have people from quite different parts of the world, and I just love to see that. So, hey, Max from Phoenix. See people from New York City, California, Kuwait, Minneapolis. Cool. I love it. Pittsburgh, Florida, Texas, a lot of Americans. I guess this is Labor Day weekend, isn't it? I didn't think about that, guys, but I hope you're enjoying your Labor Day weekend if you're in the US. And of course, I hope you're enjoying the weekend even if you're not in the US. Anyway, welcome everybody. This is the webinar on planning a productive week. I'm Peter. I'll be doing a little agenda of today's webinar in a second, but I first want to just walk you through the app that we're on right now. It's called Webinar Ninja. You may or may not have used it before. So on the right, you will have a chat. That's where you can chat and say hi. I sort of keep an eye on the chat sometimes, but like as I'm talking and speaking and as I'll be teaching you some stuff today, it's kind of hard for me to keep looking at the chat. If you have a question, there will be a question and answer section later. If you have a question, what I would ask you to do is actually scroll down. And if you scroll down, you'll see there's a tab that says questions. Okay, so if you have a question, just scroll down to the questions tab and ask your question there. And that way, when I answer it later, I'll also be able to press a button that says that I'm answering your particular question. And then people watching the replay can sort of see the questions and answers tagged with timestamps. So that's really handy. And also, if you type your question in the chat, I am likely to miss it. So Anyway, let me pull up the slides for today's webinar because I do have some slides just to help me out. Boom, and I am back. So again, today we're talking about planning a productive week. I think we'll be going for around about 60 minutes, and I'll be doing some teaching and sharing how I plan my week and how I suggest that you plan your week. And then there'll be some Q&A. And here's the agenda. So I'll be telling you briefly who I am, try to keep it short. And then we're going to get into the real important part of the webinar, which is the 3 parts really that I think of when I teach people how to plan a productive week. So the first part is doing a weekly review. And even if you already do a weekly review or you're like, oh God, no, I don't want to do a weekly review, that's fine. Let me just teach you some of the principles involved there. It doesn't have to be super formal, but why that matters when you're planning your week. Then we're going to actually talk about how to plan the whole week. And then we're going to get down and think about planning an individual day, because that's really also part of having a productive week is you got to get down to the day level as well. Then we'll do the Q&A. So again, you'll be able to ask your questions. Remember to use the questions tab at the bottom, and you can just put your questions in there, ask them, and I will go through them at that point and just answer them. And then we'll wrap up and I'll make an offer for you because I always like to make an offer for people who attend my webinars live. And that's an offer related to one of my courses. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So who am I? My name is Peter Akis. And I used to be a litigation consultant. I studied economics, political science, all that stuff. But I'm not involved in those fields whatsoever anymore. These days, I'm a productivity teacher. And I've been doing this for maybe 1.5 years, 2 years now, depends on when you start counting. I have 3 courses that help people to be more organized, more productive, achieve your goals. And I have a little over 900 students by now, which is pretty cool. I'm actually pretty happy about that. And maybe you're one of my students, or maybe you're a future student of mine. That would also be fun. So my courses are called Organize Your Life with Things 3, Get Stuff Done with OMNIFOCUS 3. I'll be telling you more about those later. And then a course titled Big Picture Productivity. Well, thank you very much for the compliment, Max. I love to hear that. If you want to know what Max had to say, check out the chat. Hello, Derek, also, by the way. All right, some of my personal interests. Well, there's a bunch of stuff. The main thing I love is to go scuba diving. Big problem right now. I like to scuba dive all over the world, but as you know, there's a global pandemic going on, and I can't go anywhere to scuba dive. So that's unfortunate, but here we are working on our productivity, and hopefully we can all be nice and productive, save up a lot of money, and do the things that we love, which for me is scuba diving. All right, let's dive into the actual teaching of the webinar. So first, we're going to talk about reviewing your projects, which is really the foundation of having a productive week. So the reason this matters is because if you don't have a good handle on what your current projects are or what their status is, very difficult to be productive, right? And so being productive kind of difficult to define, but I like to think of it as completing the work that matters. And hopefully it's also the work that you enjoy. Hopefully it's not only tedious, crappy work, but completing the tasks and the projects that really matter to you and that are going to move you forward to achieving your goals. That's how I think about productivity. But you've got to know what the current reality is, right? What the current status of your projects, of your life is. So let's start there. First thing I always suggest whenever you're planning your week is that you're doing a weekly review. And so the weekly review has a couple of parts. And the first part is to do a brain dump. So when you're sitting down, and now is a good time, it's the weekend, so we got a week coming up, what you can do is say, okay, listen, all these things that are floating around in my head, right? They need to get out of there. I need to create the mental space, right? You want to create the mental space to be able to make a plan. If you've got a lot of things floating around in your head that you feel like, oh yeah, I should have done that, or it's very difficult to have the calm and the focus that you need to say, okay, let's make a plan for the coming week. I'm going to do this on this day. I'm going to do that on that day. These are my top priorities. So I want you to start by doing a brain dump. And the objective is to create mental space. So you can ask yourself some simple questions when you do the brain dump, like what do you need to do? What do you want to do? You can use some other verbs like what should you do or what would you like to do? And just write that down. Now, I suggest that you do this in a task manager like Things 3 or OMNIFOCUS. And if you've taken one of my courses, you'll have gone through the lesson on the brain dump and you'll know how that works. Whatever task manager you're using, if it's a Windows app, something like a Todoist, a Nirvana, whatever, that same process. Just get everything in there. If you're not yet set up with a task manager, don't worry about it for now. Buy one of my courses and I'll teach you how to use it. But grab a piece of paper. It doesn't matter. Point is, get all the tasks out of your head and into some sort of system. And anything that you want to deal with, even if you can't quite phrase it as a task properly, just anything that's on your mind that you're like, that's something I have to deal with. Get it out of there. Create space. That's the first thing you want to do. Also think about future projects. So you may be thinking about things that you're working on right now, projects that are currently going on in your life. So for example, one of the things I'm thinking about is I might migrate my courses to a different course platform just to make my whole, my life a whole lot easier on the back end. Let's put it that way, on the administrative side of things, okay? So that's something I'm working on right now. So it's really got my brain going. But there are also other projects that I'm thinking of that are going to come in the future. But to the extent that those future projects are already taking up some space in my brain, even though I haven't actually started working on them yet, you still want to write those down in your brain dump. So add them to your task manager's inbox or add them to the paper list that you're using, wherever. Just put them down. Again, the objective is to create mental space. Next step, after you've gotten everything out of your head, is to process your inboxes. So I like to think of each of us having several inboxes. Okay, so I have a physical inbox. I don't know if I can lift it up. I can show you, I think. I know it's very small right now, but here's my physical inbox. It just sits next to me. So whenever I get some physical, like a letter or whatever that I have to deal with, I'll just put it in the inbox and it'll be like, if I put it in there, I know that during my weekly review, which I normally do on Sundays, I will look at that and deal with it. So if I get some letter, like I don't want to, have to remember to deal with that letter, just put it in there and then I know I'll deal with it. So I want you to do the same thing. Okay. But we can kind of think of you as having three inboxes. One is your physical inbox, one is your email inbox, and another one is your task manager's inbox if you're using a task manager. If you're using a task manager, right, then maybe throughout the week you've been adding tasks to it. And what I want you to do is process all of these inboxes. You actually, by the way, might have other inboxes too. Maybe if you're using like Slack at work or something like that, you've got like a work email, you may have a bunch of inboxes there too. But you want to take all of these and process them. So what do I mean by process? I just mean for each item that's in there, create a task that describes how to deal with it. Unless it's a very quick task, maybe it takes you 1 or 2 minutes, then you can just do it right away. But usually you'll be creating a task for something that describes how to deal with it. So it's like put away this thing, right? Or like write an email to so-and-so. So first you do the brain dump, then you go through all your inboxes and you just process them, meaning create tasks for dealing with the stuff that's in these inboxes. The next step that you want to do is to update your projects. So if you're using a task manager in the way that I teach it, or if you're using it correctly, then you'll have a list of your projects in your task manager. Okay, or maybe you're just using like a paper planner or something like that and you list your projects in there. That's also fine. But somewhere, hopefully, you'll have a list of your projects. And what I want you to do next is to go through them one by one and just make sure that they reflect reality. That's really the most important thing. Although the first question I really want you to ask yourself is, for every project that you've got listed, is it likely you're going to work on it in the next 2 weeks? So we can have lots of projects, right? So like I said, one of the projects that I'm doing is I'm evaluating different course platforms. What are some other projects I've got going on? Considering hiring a VA. So I've got another project that says consider hiring a VA, or I think I phrased it differently. It's like talk to different VA candidates or something like that. And you've got a bunch of projects too, but some projects are sort of the immediate ones that you're going to work on. And I like to think of that as in the next 2 weeks. And other projects are maybe like for next month, next quarter, next year. And so those projects that you plan to work on next month, next quarter, next year, whatever, sometime in the future, not in the next 2 weeks, mark those as things to work on someday. So if you're using Things 3, there's a nice someday bucket. If you're using OmniFocus, you can assign the someday maybe tag. If you're using some other task manager, then there might be some other way to do that, but just label those and just get them out of your view. Don't have to think about those projects that are not currently active. Okay, it's just kind of like that would take up mental space that you don't need it to take up right now. And so the next thing you want to do is just make sure that each of these projects reflects reality. Like, what's the current status? So if I have a project and it says evaluate different course platforms, right? Maybe throughout the week, I had a bunch of tasks in there that I completed, but I forgot to mark them as completed. Okay, fine. During my review, I'm just going to make sure that I mark those as completed. Or maybe there's some tasks in there that are no longer relevant, so I'm going to delete those. So just make sure that the projects and the tasks in them are still accurate, correct, up to date. Sometimes you'll think of a project that you need to do later, and you'll list it as a project, something that you want to work on, but you don't immediately list out all the steps of the project. That's fine. Okay, in that case, just fill in the tasks now. And make sure that there's a next action. There's a very tangible thing that you can visualize yourself doing. That's the next step. Okay, so for example, for my project of comparing different course platforms, I might say, figure out how the particular course platform, Teachable, handles the value-added tax that we have to charge here in Europe. That would be a very specific, targeted next action. I can visualize myself doing it, right? I'm going to the Teachable website, reading their documentation, something like that. Anyway, you want to make sure your projects are up to date. So after you've done those three things, right? So you've done the brain dump, you've processed your inboxes, and you've made sure that your project list is up to date wherever you keep it. I suggest keeping it in a task manager like Things or OmniFocus. Then it's time to start planning your week. But this first step is really important. And that's why I always recommend that everybody do a weekly review. Okay, so what I do is I do it every Sunday. And if you are not yet in the habit of doing a weekly review, I suggest that, right now or maybe right after the webinar, just go to your calendar and pick a time of the week to do your weekly review and just create a repeating calendar event for doing your weekly review. Most people like to do it on Fridays, on Sundays, or Mondays. Okay, and I would say Sunday is probably the most popular one. So I would say start with Sunday if you're not sure. Choose an hour of time every Sunday where you're going to go through this exercise, okay? And the planning your week and planning your day part, you can also do it at the same time. But the weekly review, very important just to make sure you're on top of stuff. So you've done your weekly review, or at least the first part of it, where you're making sure all your projects are up to date, things are out of your head, and you process your inboxes. Now you kind of know what's the status of all the projects in your life. Next step is to actually do the week planning. So how do I plan my week? And what do I recommend you do? Which is the same thing, by the way. Same thing, of course. I've been experimenting with this for a long time. And, after working with like 900 plus students, you'll learn a lot about what works for people, right? And it's not only students that have taken my courses, but it's also people that are part of the community that I run. I'll tell you a bit more about the community later. Also people that I've worked with one-on-one and coaching calls. So what really works is after you have a good sense of what the current status of your project is, then you start planning your week, because now you're starting from a base of truth, from a base of reality. And so the first step, which is really nice, is to reflect on the previous week. So what I like to do is just think about some wins from the previous week. I mean, what did I do last week that felt like a win? Okay. And maybe list 3 to 5. It really depends, of course, what happened with your week. And what might a win sound like? A win for me might sound like I hired a personal trainer. So that's something that I actually did a couple of weeks ago. I've been wanting to do that for a while. It just never really got around to it. And yeah, I did that a couple of weeks ago. And the first couple sessions were really fun. I've been working with them for a few weeks now. So one of my wins is like, hey, I'm really happy that I did this. This was a good decision, good use of my money. Okay. Another win might be like, I wrote X amount of blog posts, or like I created X amount of videos. So what might your wins be like? I don't know. It depends on your kind of work. It's very hard to say, right? Could be work wins though. Could be personal wins. Could be like maybe in your relationship life, there was some nice development or something like that. Maybe you went on a really fun date with your partner. All of those are wins. And you just write some down. What's the reason for doing this? It's just to have some sense of progress, right? Some sense that you're doing things that are the things that you want to be doing, right? And things are going well. So I find that often when we talk about productivity, and I'm guilty of this sometimes, is, we've got a task manager sitting there looking at our task manager, and it includes all the things that we have not yet done. And it's so easy to slip into like a negative way of looking at things, okay? Where we're only looking at the things that we haven't yet done. Maybe we're feeling bad that we haven't done them yet. And by reflecting on what you did last week that went well on these wins, it just gives you a sense of progress. Things are happening. Hey, look at what I have achieved. So that's the first thing that I like to do when it comes to actually planning the next week, is thinking about what went well last week. Next, reflect on your top priorities from last week. And we'll talk in a little bit about how to identify your priorities for the next week. And just take a look at, hey, a week ago, what did I want to achieve for the coming week? And what happened there? So you can write down a couple of things that happened, a couple of things that you learned. So for example, I could be like, oh, I learned that when I make a video, it's a lot more helpful for my students if I blank, fill in the blank, something like that. So that might be something that I learned during the week. So by writing that down, and of course, this takes a little bit of time. Like, I understand that this takes time. You're all busy. Ideally, you like to do things fast. But this really is valuable. And it's not just valuable for me. It's valuable for pretty much any student I've ever talked to who does this. Okay. People really find this valuable. And it often works really well if you do this on paper, like on a notebook. Talk more about that later as well. Many people find it easier to reflect on paper because digital tools can be quite distracting. So again, another example, as I'm reflecting on my week, I might say, hey, working with a personal trainer really freed up some brain space for me. That's both a win and also just something that I learned. So those are the kind of things. Anyway, you want to do this quick, just a couple minutes. So now you know what's going on in your life, what the status of your projects is, what the status of your tasks is, and you've reflected a little bit on last week. Okay, let's look forward. What's coming up? So the first place to get started is to take a look at the coming week and see, hey, what are some deadlines coming up? You can also look a couple weeks ahead, but particularly the next week. What are some deadlines that are coming up, if any? Are there any events that you've got scheduled? Could also be like meetings or like bigger events, Are there any tasks that for some reason you had already said you were going to do it this week? Could be like maybe you told a friend that you'd help them move apartments or something like that, right? Like, are there things that are already pre-planned? And the reason you want to do that, you want to get a sense of the time and energy that you have not yet allocated. So when you've got deadlines, when you've got events, when you've got tasks, those things will probably take up some of your time and energy, going to the events, dealing with the tasks that are already scheduled, meeting deadlines. And so aside from those things, get a sense of how much time and energy you will have available, okay? That's really important because you want to be realistic when you plan your week. If you got like 2 events a day that are like longish events, several hours each, how much work can you realistically expect to do aside from that, right? So really important to be realistic and to get a sense week by week as you're planning your week of how much of your resource of time and how much of your resource of energy you're working with. And so the next thing you want to do is get really clear on what your active projects are. So if you're not used to thinking in terms of projects, just check out some of my previous webinars because I've talked about this a few times now. But you want to ask yourself, which projects am I actively working on at the moment? So again, we talked about, I said you might have some projects for the future, right? So One of the things that's a future project for me is I might switch bookkeeping software, which may make things a little bit easier for me. But that's a 2021 project, or maybe a December 2020 project. Anyway, not a project right now. Don't have to think about it. In fact, I want it to be a someday project in my Things Task Manager so that it's out of my view. I'm not looking at it. But which projects are you actively working on right now? And be realistic, okay? So you cannot work, for example, on 12 projects at once. I often see people in their task manager and they've got like 35 projects listed and they're all supposedly active projects. It's like, no, you're not working on 35 projects this week. No way, I don't believe you. Or if you are, maybe your definition of project needs a little bit of work, okay? Or maybe you're just really scatterbrained. That's also possible. But realistically, you're probably going to have a few projects that you're working on this week. And those projects can span all areas of your life, right? So maybe at work, you've got 2 projects going on. At home, you've got a project or 2 going on, maybe in some of your relationships with other people or whatever. But across the different areas of your life, of course, each of them is going to have some projects, but you cannot work on all of them at the same time. You just cannot do it. So you want to be really clear on, okay, and intentional about on which projects am I going to be working on in the coming week, and which ones, therefore, am I not going to work on in the coming week? So already you're going to have to make a decision. You're going to say, these things I'm going to work on, those things I'm pushing off to the future. After you've done that, pick just 3 of the most important projects or chunks of projects or major tasks for the coming week. So these are not the only things that you're going to be doing for the coming week, but they're the most important ones. And the number 3 is somewhat arbitrary, right? I like to shoot for 3, but sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 4, whatever, roughly 3. And identify just, again, 3 large chunks of projects, maybe even entire projects if they're smaller projects, major tasks that you're like, you know what? I'll consider my week successful if at the end of the week I've completed these. And then write those down. So I like to do this on paper. I just find that easier, but you can write them down in a little note in your Notes app, your Apple Notes app, whatever, and be quite specific, okay? So for example, for me this week, I knew I had this webinar coming up. So one of my top tasks for the week is prepare for the Planning Your Week webinar. That was one of my top 3 priorities this week. I could have written it as webinar, but it really helps to get super specific because the more specific it is, the easier it is to judge in hindsight when you're reflecting on this week, next week, whether you did this, okay? So clearly I prepared for this webinar. That one's checked off now. And what you also want to do is after you pick these top 3 priorities for your coming week is you want to get a rough sense of which days you're going to work on these major tasks, let's say. I usually advise against making a very strict schedule for the week ahead of time. If you like to be pretty strict, for example, if you like to do time blocking, or, you know, if you've got a lot of meetings, so you really have to sort of like defend your time almost at work, especially to be able to work on things, or maybe you and your partner are taking care of the kids and you have to make good agreements on when you're going to be taking care of the kid and when it's their responsibility. Okay, I understand. But I like to keep things a little bit open. So I have a rough sense of like, okay, on Tuesday, I'll be shooting a new video for my YouTube channel. On Friday, I'll be creating the slides for the webinar and things like that, right? And so it's kind of a rough sense like that. And especially for these top 3 priorities, I find it very helpful to do that. And then the rest of the week kind of fills in alongside that. So that's the planning your week part. I do not recommend that you take all of the tiny little tasks that you may want to do in the coming week and schedule them ahead of time, because often things change, situations change. As you're moving through your week, you might find that you've got less time, you've got more time, there's an emergency, some other project becomes a priority. And so if you've got a really, really, really detailed plan that's not flexible, it will, you're likely going to go off plan. But by sticking to these top 3 things that you've identified and roughly thinking, okay, I'm going to work on that one, maybe Monday, Tuesday, that one Wednesday, the other one Thursday, just keeping it at that level. And you're welcome to put this on your calendar, of course, if you want, right? Then you've got a plan with, like, the big rocks, as they say, first. And then we're going to fill in your days around that foundation. So what about actually planning your day? What about, okay, now I've done the weekly review, updated all my projects, did the brain dump, processed my inboxes. I reflected a little bit on last week. What were my wins? What did I learn? Took a look at what are my active projects right now. And from these active projects, what are really the 3 or so most important tasks that I want to get done in the coming week. After you've done all that, then what you want to do is you want to get into planning your day. I recommend planning your day one day ahead of time in a detailed session, or planning your day morning of in a detailed way. And again, keeping that rough sense of what you're going to do forward. So today's Saturday, but let's say that you're doing this tomorrow Sunday, and you're planning Monday. I think it's very helpful to have that rough sense of when you're going to do those big tasks in the remainder of the week, but then only plan Monday in detail ahead of time. I often find that if people start planning their other days in too much detail, here's what happens. They pick 12 tasks to work on Monday. They only get 8 done. 4 of them carry over to Tuesday, but they already had 11 scheduled on Tuesday. So now they've got 15 tasks scheduled on Tuesday. They cannot complete all of those, and it just keeps rolling over and rolling over. So maybe if you're like sitting here nodding, you're like, that's me. So don't do that. That's why I always recommend only scheduling the big tasks ahead of time. Okay. But when you're planning your day, that's when you add some of the little stuff. So we're doing the same exercise here. Now we're planning Monday specifically. What are the deadlines that you've got on Monday? Are there any? What are the events, such as meetings, that you've got on Monday? What are your other obligations? Childcare today? Is it a scheduled exercise day for you, right? What are your other obligations? And after taking care of all of these things, how much time and energy do you have left? So again, we're thinking, how much time and energy am I realistically going to be able to spend? Am I going to, want to spend on productive tasks? So, as opposed to like fun and whatever, right? So get a sense of how much time and energy you have left. And then we do the same thing, fill in the big rocks first. So what I like to do is just remind myself of this week's top 3. So let's say it's Wednesday morning. I'm planning Wednesday. I like to look back at the top 3 things for this week, just to remind myself which ones did I choose to be the highest priority. Because it does happen, by the way, that sometimes throughout the week I get distracted. So maybe when I'm doing my weekly review on Sunday, I identify 3 things that are my most important tasks for this week. But then I just sort of like find a shiny object throughout the week and I just meander off. So it's good to remind myself of what I consciously decided were my top 3 priorities for this week, okay? They can change, of course, but usually I find that distractions just take me that way, and then I get the focus again by looking back. I also like to remind myself of the active projects that I've got going on, just being like, oh, right, I decided I was going to work on these projects this week, but not on those. And the next step is to look at your task manager and to look at which tasks are available. And so if you're using OMNIFOCUS and you've taken my course, you'll know that there's an available perspective that's really helpful to do this. And it just shows you all the tasks that make sense to work on right now. In Things 3, this is called the Anytime view. If you're using a different task manager, there may be a similar thing for you. And it's just a list of all the tasks that make sense to work on right now. So they're not tasks that don't make sense to work on until next month or something like that. For example, I have to do quarterly VAT returns, value-added tax returns. I have to file those. I have to do that quarterly. The one for Q3 doesn't make sense to do that until Q3 is over. So it doesn't make sense for me to work on that right now. It's not available for me right now, okay? So you want to look at your list of available tasks. And again, you want to pick sort of the 3 most important ones, or the 3 top tasks or sets of tasks. And I wrote down 1 to 3 because sometimes, there's really only one thing. Like, for example, today I'm like, okay, today, if I prepare for the webinar, it's been a productive day. I ended up doing a few other tasks as well, but really like preparing for the webinar is the most important thing, So 1 to 3 major tasks. And after you've identified those, and again, I suggest just writing them down somewhere. I write them down on paper in my notebook because I find that the most helpful. But you can also have some system in your task manager, for example, to flag them if you're using OMNIFOCUS. after you've identified those top 1 to 3 tasks, again, estimate how much time and energy you're going to have left. So, okay, after I prepare for my webinar, after I do this, after I do that, I think I'll have a little bit of time left, but I'll probably be quite tired. Okay, maybe then I should grab some smaller tasks to sprinkle in, is the way that I think about it, sprinkling in into my day, right? But that don't require so much energy. Maybe just responding to some emails or something like that. Takes time, but not that much energy. So again, you look at what's available in your task manager and just pick a few of the less important tasks. And what might be some examples of these less important tasks? For me, that might be like process my email inbox. It might be like reply to some thread on my community that I run. It might be pick something up from the store. It might be like clean my hand coffee grinder because I have a manual coffee grinder that I grind my coffee beans with every morning. That thing needs cleaning sometimes. You know, these little things. I kind of sprinkle those in. So you want to choose a few of these on top of the important tasks if you have the time and energy available. So this is where a lot of people get stuck. So they get way too optimistic about what they can do on any given day, okay? But if you're really deliberate about your productivity, if you're super laser focused on these are my most important tasks, I definitely want to get those done. And then you take the attitude of, well, if I have time and energy left after completing those, it would also be nice to work on these other ones. If you take that attitude, then it's easier to figure out whether your day was a success. You may not have completed all 12 tasks on your list, but you did the 3 most important ones and 2 other ones. Okay, you only did 5 out of 12, but you got the most important ones done. So for these less important tasks that you want to sprinkle in, just don't let those prevent your progress on your top tasks. That's the key. And so the easiest way to do that is to do the most important tasks or the more important tasks earlier on in the day. Sounds simple, totally true. It's really easy. I have this too sometimes to think, okay, I really don't want to work on the webinar slides right now. So I'll do that this afternoon, you know? But then this afternoon's Peter is like, yeah, great. I wish I did that this morning. So generally what I try to do is work on those top 1 to 3 tasks first and then see if there's energy for the less important tasks. So here's a tip from me, and that is to plan your day on paper. And some of the weekly planning also on paper, like I said. This may come as a surprise to those of you who know me as the person who teaches people how to use OmniFocus or things. It's kind of where I started out. And even though these days I also have a course called Big Picture Productivity that covers more than just like how to use your task manager to be more organized and be more productive. So this may come as a surprise to those of you because I'm a big fan of digital task managers, and in particular, things in OmniFocus, which are just like so much better than any other task manager that I know of. And I'm pretty plugged into this space. So definitely use a digital task manager. I mean, absolutely. Totally managing your tasks and projects on paper through something like a bullet journal or whatever. That's, you know, that's always really fun to look at. There's this new system. It's on Kickstarter called Analog, and it raised, last time I looked, like $400,000 or something on Kickstarter, something nuts. And you're supposed to be able to plan your days and your weeks with that. That stuff always looks really pretty. It's like productivity porn, basically. You know, it like looks really pretty, and you can imagine a world in which you're using those systems and you're like extremely productive. But in reality, those things are tricky because your life is messy and you've got so many tasks coming into your life through your email inbox, you know, your boss asking you to do things, things that you want to do at home. Your insurance company sends you a letter, you got to deal with it. You just get so many things that you want to deal with. And if you try to track all of that and organize it all on paper, it quickly gets out of hand and you'll be spending a lot of time copying, hand copying tasks. But it is really helpful to plan your week and your day on paper. Here's how I do it these days. Sit down in the morning. I tend to do it right after breakfast. So basically I wake up and either I meditate and then I have breakfast, or I have breakfast and then I plan my day and then I meditate. But anyway, before I actually do any work is I sit down and I grab my planner and my task manager. And I look at my task manager and I see, okay, any tasks with a deadline today? And then I look at my calendar and I say, okay, what are my events for today? And I write those down in the paper planner. And just by writing those things down already helps you mentally build a plan a little bit. And then I say, okay, Now, what are the top 3 things that I want to work on today? So I go to my task manager, which in my case is things 3. I go to the anytime view and I look at all the tasks there and I say, which are the 3 most important ones? And I pick those and then I say, I'm going to work on those today. Write that down in my paper planner. Okay. And throughout the day, I work through these things. And then at the end of the day, I just reconcile the task manager and the paper planner again. Really easy. Make sure that they're, in lockstep. And the reason that I find this helpful and that many of my students have found this helpful is because screens can really distract so easily. We all look at screens a lot, and if you try to plan your day with your task manager, maybe it goes well, but maybe you'll see a message coming in on messages, WhatsApp, whatever. You see an email coming in and you're like, oh, and there's a thought train. It takes you in the email. And soon, before you know it, you spend an hour and a half doing things that were related to emails that you just got, and you still haven't made a plan for what are the most important things of your day, but you're already tired. So that's why I recommend doing the daily planning particularly, but also some of the weekly reflecting and stuff on paper. Really helps. Try it out. One thing you can use, it's called a planner. It's Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner is one that I like using for this. By the way, I'm not affiliated in any way with Michael Hyatt. Don't know the guy. Just like his planner, just a little notebook. But to be honest, any notebook is going to work for this. No problem whatsoever. I really like using it in conjunction with the task manager. Again, the task manager is the source of truth, the central source of truth. It has all of your tasks with your deadlines and everything, right? And in the morning, you use your task manager to see what's available, what makes sense for you to work on. And you just write down your plan on paper. You work through your day, and in the evening, you make sure it's all synced up. Boom. Try it out. You might find that it's super valuable for you if you're used to only using a digital task manager. Okay, that was a lot of talking on my part, and I think it's time for Q&A. So what I'm going to do now is answer your questions. If you have a question, again, please answer or ask it in the questions box below. So just scroll down and you'll see a questions tab. And so ask your question there, and I'm just going to start answering them pretty much in the order that they came in. And we'll do this until I've answered all the questions or until we run out of time. And then I'll tell you a little bit about the offer that I've got for you guys today. So stick around for the offer. Cool. Max asks, do I have a time preference of when to do the brain dump? I don't know if you mean like time of day, Max, but basically I do my brain dump as part of my weekly review. So again, I do this on Sundays. That just works the best for me. Even though I have my own sort of business where I work from home and I'm not really tied to weekends or anything like that, the rest of the world runs on weekends and weekdays. And so what I like to do is make my weekly plan on Sunday. Tends to work really well. And it's part of the weekly review, the brain dump. So it's step 1 of the weekly review is get things out of my head. And throughout the week, you may find that if you work with the system that I teach, if you work with it consistently, that you're going to end up getting a lot of things out of your head into your task manager throughout the week. So there may not be that much left to brain dump on the weekend, but that's when I do it. So that's a quick answer to your question. If that's not what you meant to ask, then ask another question and I'll let you know. I've got Based, that's an interesting name, asking how many projects should someone be working on in a specific time max? Good question. And that's a question that I get often. There's really no number that is like 5. It doesn't make sense for me to say that because it depends on how big your projects are. But the way to think about this really is the cost of switching contexts in your brain, of like changing your attention from one project to another. So if I'm spending time in my week thinking about like a new course platform to use, I'm thinking about a lot of technical questions, right? I'm investigating different course platforms, seeing if they meet all my needs. Do they integrate with the other tools that I'm using? That takes a lot of brain power. That's just a lot of thinking. And that's just like one business project. And maybe that week I can also record some YouTube videos. I recorded some YouTube videos in the past week, okay? But YouTube videos are pretty self-contained. But there's another business project that I've got coming up that's kind of a bigger business project. No way will I be able to sort of devote enough attention to all 3 of those at the same time. So in that case, for me, it's kind of 2 or 3, but a lot of these are small. I consider one YouTube video a project, or writing my weekly article. I don't know if you guys are subscribed to my email list, but if you are, you'll get my Sunday articles. And so I write an article and I send it every Sunday. Writing the article is also a project for me, but that's pretty self-contained. So if we've got small projects like that, you can do a good amount during a week. But if you've got a big project, like for me, moving my courses from one platform to another, that's a very large project. I definitely can't even complete it in 1 week. And yeah, so the answer is really that it depends on the size of the project. But think about the costs of switching your attention. Again, the reason why I said you probably don't want to work on 12 projects at once is because your brain cannot keep up with like all the questions and thoughts you have about all those things at once. Okay. And if you think that you can switch your attention that fast, maybe you're not really like being honest with yourself, anyway, I think this is really the case for projects that require a lot of thought. So if there's things that don't really require a lot of thought, maybe you can do more simultaneously. But that's the answer. Don't have a number for you. Pay attention to whether you feel focused enough. Okay, now we've got a comment from Peter, and Peter says, I make heavy use of the pause functionality in OmniFocus, which he says is the on hold. Yeah, that's the technical term, is on hold. And so Peter makes heavy use of the on hold functionality in OmniFocus instead of having a someday folder or tag. Any reflections on that? My reflection on that, Peter, is that is fantastic and great. I love it. That's what I tell people to do. It makes a lot of sense. It really has the same effect. Basically, if you've got a bunch of projects and you're not going to be working on them in, let's say, the next 2 weeks, just put them on hold. What does that do? It makes all of the tasks that are part of that project show as not available for you to work on right now. And then when you're planning your week or when you're planning your day, you have a smaller choice set. So you have a smaller set of tasks to choose from, right? And so choosing the 3 most important tasks out of a set of 32 is a lot easier than choosing the 3 most important tasks out of a set of 89. And so excellent, Peter. Love that you're doing that. Keep that up. Got a question from Kimmy. Kimmy says, in OmniFocus, would you mark a project as on hold or keep it active and put it in someday maybe if you plan to work on it 3 or 4 weeks from now or earlier if you find the time? See my previous answer, Kimmy. Yeah, just put it on hold. Put it on hold. Someday maybe is fine also, but put it on hold. What I like to do, Kimmy, is if you put it on hold, you can still see that project during your weekly review. So if you're doing your weekly review, then every week you're going to see that project again, even though it's on hold, and you can see, hey, should this still be on hold, or am I likely to work on it in the next week or 2? And if now you're saying, oh, now I'm likely to work on it in the next week or 2, fine. Then you make it project active again. Real simple. So I hope that makes sense. And let me know in the chat if these things make sense or if you want any clarification or anything like that. Okay, got a lot of questions. That's good. I love it. I love that you guys are answering or asking questions. So Scott asks, how do you focus on a project in an environment where other people create tasks that need to be completed immediately? Oof. Good question, Scott. It really helps to have some detail. But let's say you're in a corporate environment. Okay, so let's say you're in a corporate environment and you have someone who's assigning you work all the time, and you also simultaneously have some longer term projects that you would like to work on, but you're finding that these things that need to be completed immediately are really taken away from your focus, are breaking, up your zen or whatever, right? Your flow. One thing you could do is actually try talking to the people that create those tasks for you and say, listen, I also have these other projects on my plate. I think they'll be really valuable to our company or to our team, but these are things that really take me some time and focus, and I really need to be able to concentrate on these things. So by always giving me these tasks that need to be completed immediately, it's much more difficult for me to focus on these longer term projects. So are these longer term projects important to the team, to the company, right? And then let's say your manager says, you know what, they are important. Then you can say, okay, I think so too. But in that case, can we come up with a way to give me some time where I can do what Cal Newport calls deep work, right? So the really important work that requires concentration, that requires you to like wrestle with something for some period of time, maybe a couple of hours or something like that. So I would talk to the people that are creating those tasks for you and just explain your problem. Of course, not every person in the world is reasonable. Some people will be unreasonable. In that case, you've got a problem. But that would be my first answer, is actually try it. Go talk to them. Okay, question from Andrew. Any suggestions on evaluating which is the most priority of all the priorities? I always seem to have too many. Andrew, that's a good question. In a sense, this is what my course, Big Picture Productivity, is about. So let me tell you something that we do in the course. If you're having trouble choosing, then ask yourself why something is a priority. And you may have to go several levels deep with why. So let's say what's going on is you've sort of got 8 projects identified and you're like, I really want to work on all of these 8 projects this week. But realistically, I don't have the time for that. I don't have the energy for that. So how do I choose between these 8? What I teach in Big Picture Productivity is actually for every single sort of bigger project, important project, we sit down and we write down why this is an important project. Like, which of your goals does it help you achieve? We don't do this for like a very small thing. Like if I'm writing an article, I'm not going to ask myself this. But if I'm doing a bigger project, like I'm saying, I'm evaluating different course platforms, I'm going to write down why. Why might I want to switch to a different course platform? Like, which of my goals does that contribute to? And it forces me to get really precise and clear and say, okay, I want to do that maybe because it lowers the amount of time that I have to spend on bookkeeping. So I have more free time to do all the other valuable tasks that you guys benefit from. Or maybe I'm doing it because it's a better experience for my students. Or maybe I'm doing it because it saves me money or makes me more money or whatever, right? So what I suggest that you do is, if you've got these priorities, dig really deep on each of these. Why do you think this is a priority for you? Like what is a goal that you have that you think you'll achieve by working on this project? And you could even go a step further, and we do this in the course Big Picture Productivity, is ask, why is this goal important to me? So it really gets down to your values, really gets down really, really deep, and say, this is important to me because I value competence. So I want to take an online course on whatever. And the reason I want is because I want to be good at this particular thing. And I do that because I pride myself on being competent, on being good at stuff, right? And so by asking the why, that will give you some insight into balancing priorities. Ooh, a lot of questions. Hope I'll be able to answer all of these. Okay. Micah says, if you get behind on inboxes, do you have an approach for catching up? Micah, what does behind mean? When is one behind on an inbox? What does that mean? Let's say there's an email inbox and you feel that you are behind. Oh, I see that there's a comment. Yeah, Micah says lots of emails, tons of tasks. So often when people tell me this, they feel like they're behind. There can be a couple of problems. One problem can be bad expectation setting or bad precedent setting. So if you work in corporate and you've got some people that are assigning you tasks, and every time they assign you a task, you always immediately do it. You always immediately do the task, or you immediately get back to them. You're kind of training them to like keep giving you more tasks, right? So that could be a problem. Another problem is people just overcommit themselves. So this is kind of what I was talking to Andrew about recently in the previous answer. It's like, it is possible to just have like so many priorities, quote priorities, right? They're not really all priorities if you have too many. And it could just be unrealistic. It's just maybe not possible to work on all of these things. So it's very hard for me to say without more detail, like what the underlying problem is. But really the solution is always to deal with the underlying issue, right? Maybe your problem is that you've just overcommitted yourself, or your boss tries to assign you more than you can reasonably handle, right? Maybe your problem is that bad precedent settings and stuff like that. So it's very difficult for me to say. Personally, I really try to single task, really try to do one thing at a time, right? And this is what I was talking about earlier too, with not having too many active projects at once. So by saying, okay, this week I'm really only going to have the time to do these 2 major projects and some bunch of smaller things. Okay, the rest of it, it is what it is. I guess we're not working on that this week, maybe in the future. And then if I find that things pile up, if then there's a whole list of things that I was hoping to get done, let's say this quarter, that I don't know, I'm like, okay, I guess for next time that I'm planning my quarter, I'm just going to have to be more judicious. And just reality, can't work on everything. So I know this maybe not the perfect answer for you, Micah, but yeah, it's really, there's usually an underlying cause for it, rather than like the emails themselves are just a symptom, right? So go at the cause. That's my answer. We've got Vigneshwar asks, how frequently do you review your Sunday maybe tasks to avoid ignoring something important for too long? Every week in the weekly review. This is a quick answer. If you're doing your weekly review, you'll see if you've put a project on hold, if it's a Sunday maybe project or task, you're going to see it in your weekly review. Now, all you've got to do is decide, is it relevant in the next 2 weeks? Yes, take it out of Sunday maybe, take it off of on hold, make it active again. If not, leave it. So, weekly review. Andrew asks, if OmniFocus is the best, how close is Things 3? Well, Andrew, I will refer you to my website, peteruckes.net, and I've got an article on there about OmniFocus versus Things. It's really not that one is better than the other one. I recommend Things 3 for most people, and I recommend OmniFocus for people who have an especially large number of commitments and tasks that they, active projects, right? Or especially complex projects. I find that Things 3 is best for most people because it's more opinionated, allows for less tinkering and more doing. That's really why. And the app is just like nicer to use, better design. Okay, Marinda says, you may have already touched on this. Have you ever tried doing a daily review, basically a mini weekly review? Sometimes I find myself avoiding my weekly review because there's so many accumulated tasks, inbox, items, etc. I have to deal with. I'm wondering if making sure my inboxes are to 0 every day might help minimize overwhelm at the end of the week. Marinda, I have not done that in a structured way. I do process my email several times during the week normally, so I don't usually let them sit until Sunday. I try to be more responsive than that. But you could do this. So like the real answer is, I have not done that formally, but even if I had and it worked for me, it may not work for you. And the only way to find out is to do it. So this seems like a great case, Marinda, for simply giving it a shot, doing it for, let's say, 2 weeks every day, and writing down what your results are, whether you're liking it better. Little word of caution, don't get hung up on inbox 0. It's nice to have processed all your email, but we don't want that to be the goal in itself, right? We want the goal for you to feel less overwhelmed, but you can almost think of the opposite becoming the case if you're like getting really, really hung up on making sure that you get to inbox 0 every day. That could create stress for you. Okay. Hope I'll be able to answer all of these, because I do want to wrap up in maybe, let's say, like 6 minutes or something like that. And I've got a couple of things to tell you about. So I'll take a few more questions and then I'll wrap it up, because I don't want to keep you guys too long. Kai says, I just bought your OmniFocus course. Well, welcome, Kai. Thank you. That's great. Is it recommended to finish the course before dive into OmniFocus? Yes, I recommend that you, so the way it works in the course is, as you're going through the course lessons, in each lesson, not in each lesson, but in many lessons, I'll tell you, okay, now go do this. So I'll explain how something works, and then I'll invite you to do it. So you're kind of like setting up your OmniFocus and learning how to use it at the same time. And at the end, you come away with a workflow that you can rely on. So it's not one or the other. It's kind of like go through the lessons, and then in some lessons, I'll tell you, now go do this. Based asks, do you think monthly reviews have their place, or is it redundant? I find that it works best to do weekly reviews and quarterly planning. Quarterly planning is a whole different topic. You can look at some of my previous webinars for a little bit of detail, but really if you want a good system for doing that, you want to check out my course, Big Picture Productivity, which I will tell you about in a minute. And I find monthly reviews just, a little bit too much, honestly. Max says, when are you writing a book for shifting productivity mindsets? My money is ready, lol. All right, Max, thanks. I'll keep that in mind. Maybe in a couple of years, man. Writing a book is a big project. Shouldn't be underestimated. One of my friends is currently writing a book, and it's a lot of work. Okay, Kevin says, how do you handle fun or weekend activities? In other words, do you put things that are intended for fun in your plan for today? Of course, Kevin, of course. Life is not all about doing things that are, quote, productive. So, of course, if you've got fun things scheduled, then you're going to have less time and energy left over to do things that are, quote, productive, right? So, I do keep those in mind in my daily planning. Same thing with like lifting. If I know I'm going to go to the gym and have a session with my personal trainer, then I'll have less time left at the end, right? So cool. And Micah says I covered this in my course, which is totally true. Okay, last question, and then we'll wrap up. Kimmy says, in OmniFocus, please comment on using tags like next week or next month to help differentiate the on-hold tasks and projects from those that can be ignored for a longer period of time. Yeah, Kimmy, I don't recommend doing that. I'm generally not a fan of using too many tags because I find that the system gets complicated. I like for people to keep it really simple and not focus too much time on managing their tasks in the task manager. So instead of using tags like that, I've got the weekly review and the quarterly planning process, and I teach people how to use the quarterly planning process in Big Picture Productivity. So that would be my answer. With that, thank you everybody for the questions. Let me tell you a little bit about my courses. I've told you about my OmniFocus and Things courses. Those are really the same, just with a different app. My OmniFocus course or my Things course, you will learn a workflow you can trust. You will learn how to organize your projects. You'll learn how to plan your week, plan your day, and you'll get more stuff done. Really simple. That's what it is. It's really not about the apps. It's really about how to use the apps to feel less overwhelmed, less stressed, more focused, get stuff done. That's really what it's about. We've got a lovely screenshot here of, I don't know, I'm not looking too happy in this screenshot, I guess. And so the other course that I have is Big Picture Productivity. And this is my latest course. And so in my OmniFocus and Things courses, they're really about day-to-day and week-to-week getting stuff done. But I found that a lot of my students were also thinking bigger. How do I have big goals? How do I achieve my goals? How do I make sure that I'm consistently making progress, right? That I'm consistently doing things to help me achieve those bigger goals I have for my life? And how can I stay focused on what really matters to me? And so that's why I created Big Picture Productivity. That's what it's all about. The course also comes with a community, by the way, which is a very fun place. Launched that maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's quite a fun place. I hang out in there. Some of my students hang out in there. We're chatting with each other, discussing productivity topics, sharing best practices. And I've gotten a lot of value out of it already myself. And I think a lot of other people have too. So if you're thinking, okay, Peter has 3 courses, here's some screenshots from the community. You're thinking Peter has 3 courses, which course is right for me? Well, if you're thinking, I want to learn how to better organize my projects, if you're thinking, listen, I just first want to focus on being productive day to day, week to week, then I suggest you enroll in Organize Your Life with Things 3 or Get Stuff Done with OmniFocus 3. Send you the link to those in a minute. Really good foundation. Really good foundation. Have you been organized, being productive day to day? If, on the other hand, you say, you know what, my day-to-day feels really good. I want to focus on achieving my big goals. I'm focusing on what really matters. Or maybe your day-to-day is not so good, but you're thinking, it could be good if only I knew how to actually make progress on my goals, how to translate my big goals into action. That's another way to look at what Big Picture Productivity is about. Then I highly encourage you to enroll in Big Picture Productivity. Okay, that's what I made the course for, to say, listen, we've got these big aspirations, but on a day-to-day level, we're working through tasks. How do you connect those 2 dots? That's what Big Picture Productivity is all about. Just want to, hey, Max, you're here, by the way. Max gave a really lovely testimonial for one of my courses. So thanks, Max. This is what Max had to say. It's only been a week since he got my course, and his life hasn't felt this organized ever. So there we go. And if you're doubting whether this is a real testimonial, you can Max can say something in the chat or something. Another thing that I heard one of my students say recently is she said, "Hey, I went from 50% productivity to 1,000%. She finished 2 university courses in August with an A and A plus, and at the same time launched 2 new products and maintained her business and current products." And so this was after taking one of my courses. So, well, that's lovely to hear. And just an example of the kind of results that people are getting. One more. One of my students from a while back, he said, you know what? Like, I manage 500 employees. I have a $40 million budget that I'm managing. So I got a lot of projects and tasks, but he really found my course super helpful for starting the week, what he calls supercharged. Just had his schedule and his tasks lined up, ready for him to work through. So that's another result you can get taking one of my courses. Okay, what offer do I have for you today? If you enroll in Big Picture Productivity in the next 3 hours, you get a complimentary 45-minute one-on-one coaching call with me. So normally I charge quite a bit for my one-on-one coaching calls, and a 45-minute call is a $165 value. So if you enroll in the course in the next 3 hours, this is only valid for enrolling in Big Picture Productivity, by the way, you can really get like direct personal feedback from me. So what could we do on this coaching call? We could take a look at the plan that you've made for the next couple of weeks or for the quarter. We can take a look at your goals and how to translate those into projects you can take action on. We could talk about habits that you want to improve. Really a lot we can do on a 45-minute one-on-one call. Often with people, I'll spend time looking at their task manager, improving the setup, improving the structure, just help people feel more on top of their things if it's getting a little out of control. So all you got to do is enroll in Big Picture Productivity in the next 3 hours. Of course, you'll get access to the course, all the modules in the course, all the videos, the workbooks, the exercises. You'll also get access to the community where I hang out and some of your fellow students hang out. But if you do this in the next 3 hours, you'll also get the 45-minute one-on-one coaching call with me as a bonus. So there's a few details. If you scroll down and you go to the offers tab, there's a few details. So the way basically it works is if you enroll in the next 3 hours, then I will send you a link where you can schedule your 45-minute session that's complimentary. If you wait until midnight to do this, then, oh, Max says we lost sound. Is that true? Other people also not hearing me? Okay. All right. Thanks, folks. Looks like it's a problem on Max's end. Anyway, yeah, I'll send you a link. So if you enroll sort of like right before the deadline, I might be asleep, so I'll send you the link to schedule your complimentary call tomorrow. so just give me a second to do that. Anyway, yeah, would love to see you enroll in the course. You can find my courses over at peteruckes.net/products. Pretty easy. peteruckes.net/products. Or you can just Google my name and you'll find me. So would love to see you enroll. And if you take advantage of the offer now, we're going to have a one-on-one chat real soon and help you out with whatever productivity challenge you're struggling with. That's it for today. Thank you very much for attending. Always love to have a bunch of you attending live, asking questions. Thank you very much for asking your questions. Good questions. If you like this, tell people about it. The webinar is available on replay, so you can share it with people. They can watch it. And with that said, enjoy the rest of your day. Ciao.